Today, we are going to visit the Commonwealth graves at the small town of Svinø, located at the southern part of Zealand in Denmark. During the war, approximately 300 Allied aircraft were downed over Denmark, resulting in the deaths of around 2,200 airmen. While many were repatriated, a significant number were buried in Denmark. Svinø churchyard became one of the central burial sites designated by the German authorities during the occupation. Initially, 108 Allied airmen were interred here, but in 1948, 46 American airmen were exhumed and reburied in other countries, leaving 62 British Commonwealth airmen in the cemetery. Many Allied aircraft were shot down or crashed over southern Zealand, particularly in the waters around Svinø. The church's cemetery was relatively close to these locations, making it a practical burial site. Despite being enemies, the Germans often buried Allied airmen with military honors. Choosing a churchyard like Svinø allowed for a dignified burial. Churchyards with war graves holds a silent multitude of stories, each headstone marking a life once lived, a fate shaped by war, duty, and sacrifice. These resting places are not just rows of names, they are powerful reminders of individual journeys, losses, and the enduring human cost of conflict. Each grave represents a person with dreams, families, and a unique journey, reminding us that history is made up of deeply personal fates. The last flight of Henry Lay. On a cold night in 1943, the navigator Sergeant Henry Lay climbed aboard his Halifax bomber as one of the 8-man crew bound for a dangerous mission over occupied Europe. The darkness was thick, the air tense, and the sky alive with the drone of engines heading into war. Henry, a devoted husband and father, knew the risks well. Each flight could be his last. In the night between the 20th and the 21st of April 1943, 339 bombers from the RAF attacked Stettin. The sky was clear, and the marking made by the pathfinders was perfect. About 40 hectares of the city center was hit, and 13 factories and 380 houses were totally destroyed. 13 Lancasters, 8 Halifaxes, and 9 Stirlings were lost, and about 20 of them were lost over Denmark and Danish waters. About 20 planes were lost due to flak, while 66 planes were damaged by mainly light flak, 20 millimeters, and 80% of them had flown lower than 500 feet when they were hit. About 30 engagements and attacks from German night fighters were reported. At Corsa, the Halifax came under fire. Whether it was German flak or a deadly Messerschmitt 110 night fighter, no one can say for certain. What is known is that the aircraft was hit. Flames tore through the fuselage, and in the chaos, the bomber went down. Henry Lay perished in the crash, far from home, lost in the fire and fury of the skies. Back in London, his wife Margaret waited anxiously in their home in Earl's Court, with their 3 young children and a 4th on the way. They had already survived countless air raids, but then tragedy struck again. Before the War Office could even locate Margaret to deliver the missing in action telegram, her home had been destroyed by a German bomb. The house was reduced to rubble. Margaret survived, but her unborn child did not. Their 3 children were all killed. By the time the telegram finally found her, Margaret Lay had already lost everything.
I am a wife without a husband and a mother without children. So, I am nobody.
Henry and Margaret's story is one of countless wartime tragedies too painful to imagine, too important to forget. Their names may be etched in stone or tucked into faded military records, but their loss echoes on. A broken family, and the high cost of war paid not just in the skies, but also in the homes left behind. Just a few headstones away lie the men of Stirling, M for Mother, who faced the same skies, the same enemy and the same tragic end. The mission. It all had begun on the evening of April 20th, 1943. A major bombing operation was launched from bases in England against numerous German targets. Among the planes taking part in the raid was a Stirling bomber, M4 Mother, of the 7th Squadron Pathfinders. The plane had a mixed crew of men from the British Commonwealth. Their destination that night was Stettin, and their mission was to locate the target area and mark it with incendiaries as a guide for the rest of their planes. They had an extra crew member that night, Squadron Leader Blake, a Canadian pilot, who was new to the squadron and who was to accompany them on an orientation flight. Their aircraft was damaged by flak on approach to the target and, unable to mark it reliably, they aborted and left the job to a backup plane. Heading back to England, they flew over the Baltic and the relative safety of the water. As they approached Korsa in Denmark, they had to veer across land to avoid a flak ship in the belt, but soon found themselves under attack by an Messerschmitt 110 night fighter. The plane caught fire and the order to bail out was given. Flight Engineer Donald Smith was the only one who managed to escape from the plane before it crashed into a farmer's field near Cuxmark. Landing a few fields away from the crash site, he buried his parachute and set off at a walk-run to put as much distance as possible between him and the plane, knowing that the Germans would soon arrive to investigate. An extra crew member on board that night might have misled the Germans into thinking that the entire crew had perished and that there were no survivors. Crew members killed in the crash. Pilot Officer Navigator Elmer Robert Vance, Flight Lieutenant Pilot Charles Woodbine Parish, who had received a Distinguished Flying Cross on the way back from a bombing raid on Boulogne in northern France on the 9th of September 1940. His Wellington bomber was struck by lightning and caught fire in one engine and the other engine stopped. The crew of 6 bailed out over the English Channel, and he had to swim 7 miles or 11 kilometers to the English coast. The other 5 crew members drowned. He was on his second tour of duty when he was killed in the crash at Kongsmark. Sergeant Air Gunner Jack Lees, Warrant Officer Class 2 Air Observer James Stanley Marshall, Warrant Officer Class 2 Wireless Operator and Air Gunner Louis John Kralitsky, Sergeant Air Gunner Dennis Charles Farley, Squadron Leader Pilot Wilfred Albert Blake. Blake is not shown in this picture. Over the next few days, Donald kept up a steady pace in an easterly direction, keeping to fields and rural areas to avoid German soldiers. He had been injured in the escape. His hands were badly cut and his nose had been broken. He was tired and hungry, and his feet were badly blistered from the chafing of his flight boots. Donald desperately needed help, and he approached Danish farmhouses to ask for food, water, and directions. In most cases, the people did not speak English, but they were able to communicate with sign language. He was never turned down by any of the people he approached, and more importantly, he was never turned in, even though helping an Allied airman would have brought swift and severe reprisals to any Danes caught doing so. He eventually reached Elsinore, just across the strait from Sweden. There, he connected with Danish resistance members, including Lars Trawan, who helped him cross the Sound in a kayak. He was eventually routed via Stockholm to a commercial flight to Scotland and then onward to Canada. For his courageous escape, he was awarded the Distinguished Flying Medal presented by King George VI. Don Smith died in 1998. He had requested that his ashes be interred alongside the graves of his crewmates at Svinø. In 1999, he was reunited with them. And so, decades after that dark night in 1943, Donald Smith was brought home, not to his birthplace, but to his brothers in arms in the peaceful soil of Svinø. Together, at last, a short phrase that holds a deep truth of loyalty, of sacrifice, and of the enduring bonds between those who gave everything for freedom. Thanks for watching.